Hello everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to the spring campaign for Arkham Horror, the card game. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be taking on the Dunwich Legacy campaign. I'll also mix in some thoughts about the campaign, but I've played this campaign several times, so this will be far from a blind playthrough. Anyway, we have a very quick soundbite, if I can ever... There's my phone. We have a very quick soundbite before we actually get into the introduction proper for the campaign. So, once I pull it up here, let's go ahead and knock that out real quick. Here we go. I think it's this one.
Dunwich Legacy Intro. Their hand is at your throat, yet you see them not. I'm going to burn his accursed diary, and if you men are wise, you'll dynamite that altar stone up there, and pull down all the rings of standing stones on the other hills. Things like that brought down the beings those Whateleys were so fond of. H.P. Lovecraft, The Dunwich Horror. Dunwich Lake...
Okay, now that we've got all that out of the way. So, before we actually go meet the investigators, I do want to talk about the new house rule I'm going to debut with this campaign. I started the mid-campaign part with the winter campaign, but the new house rule is this. After the first scenario, or any scenario where we earn 0 experience, I'm going to allow myself up to 2 level 0 swaps for free. Normally, these swaps would cost 1 experience per swap, but doing this will give me something to do during upgrades videos when we have no experience to spend, and it'll let me do something to prepare for each scenario. Plus, this effectively gives me a test scenario in the first scenario to see how the decks perform as built, and I can correct any deck building mistakes I made. As always, the links to the decks on Arkham DB will be in the description down below. But now that we're through that, let's drop down and meet the investigators, and we'll start with this campaign's Kluver. Here's our Kluver, Daisy Walker. She's the librarian of the investigators, and she's a strong seeker. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at her investigator card. So we've got a 3 will, 5 lore, 2 combat, 2 agility, Miskatonic. You may take an additional action during your turn, which can only be used on tome action abilities. As an action, her elder sign, +0. If you succeed, draw 1 card for each tome you control. And then her flavor text, I know of books so powerful, they can rewrite reality. 5 health, 9 sanity. On the back, we have deck size of 30. Deck building options, Seeker level 0 to 5, Mystic 0 to 2, Neutral cards 0 to 5. Requirements that don't count toward deck size, Daisy's Tote Bag, the Necronomicon John Dee Translation, 1 random basic weakness. As a respected librarian at Miskatonic University, Daisy had always felt that books were the most important thing in her life. She explored in fiction what she abhorred in life: horror, violence, fear. Then she stumbled across the John Dee translation of the Necronomicon. It was blasphemous, unholy, and too awful to be real. But given her studies in obscure and occult subjects, Daisy knew that there was more truth than fiction within the book's pages. She began to wonder what other secrets the restricted collection of the Orne Library held. Oh boy. Now, let's take a look at her signature card, Daisy's Tote Bag. 2 costs to play, Will, Lore, and a wild card on commit, Daisy Walker deck only. You have 2 additional hand slots which can only be used to hold tome assets. Speaking of tomes, that'll bring us to our weakness, the Necronomicon John Dee Translation. It is an item tome. Revelation, put the Necronomicon into play in your threat area with 3 horror on it. It can't leave play while it has 1 or more horror on it. Treat each elder sign you reveal on a chaos token as a tentacle. As an action, move 1 horror from the Necronomicon to Daisy Walker. Then, if the Necronomicon has no horror on it, discard it, and it does take up a hand slot, so that is something we'll need to be careful of. We can remember that Daisy has a free action that we can use on tome abilities, so if we have that out, we can use it on that. But anyway, that actually brings me to a potential interaction between one of Daisy's cards and her character weakness. So let's take a quick look at the Research Librarian. It's a 2-cost ally to play with an agility on commit. As a reaction, after Research Librarian enters play, search your deck for a tome asset and add it to your hand. Shuffle your deck. Now, the interaction here is because the research librarian grabs me a tome, and the Necronomicon is a tome, I could conceivably choose to go find it right away. And it actually might not be a terrible thing to do, because Daisy does have the sanity to absorb the Necronomicon right away, and pulling it out of her deck before it can cause problems wouldn't actually be a terrible idea, especially if it comes up later in the scenario when I desperately need to be able to pass skill tests, and I don't want a pseudo-tentacle in the bag. As you've seen in previous campaigns, one tentacle is enough to give me plenty of problems. But that musing aside, we'll also feature what I like to call the three faces of Daisy. So we'll have the promo Daisy. This is the Invocation 2017 promo. This is probably the one I'll have the most. But we'll also have her original core art and her revised core art. And as you've seen, these cards aren't sleeved yet. Neither is the mini revised core Daisy. But I am going to have everything sleeved before we jump into the campaign. But anyway, as you've noticed, we are playing with regular Daisy. There is a parallel investigator for Daisy, but I don't really like that parallel investigator. Somehow, as a small aside too, Daisy's only the second core investigator that we've featured on the channel, with Agnes during last year's summer campaign during Circle Undone being the first. But as you'll see in the deck list below, Daisy's got a pretty standard Seeker build, but her Mystic Splash gives her access to some pretty powerful tools to further enhance her clue-gathering abilities or help her defend herself if she needs to. But of course, we'll have to see how the campaign unfolds to determine which path I need to take. Now, hopefully this won't turn into another situation where I need for my Seeker to dip too far into combat. That, among other things, caused problems for Harvey and Lola in Dream Eaters last spring, so I'll be looking to avoid that if I can. Anyway, that will do it for Daisy. Now let's go meet her Monster Puncher for this campaign. Our Monster Puncher this campaign is Stella Clark, the letter carrier. She's the survivor of the starter deck investigators. Similar to what we did with Harvey and Dream Eaters last year, we're going to use her deck unchanged at the start, and the upgrades packaged with her if we can. As usual, though, again, we'll have to see where the campaign takes us in terms of needed upgrades. With that, let's take a look at Stella. Her stat line is pretty decent. 3 will, 2 lore, 3 combat, 4 agility. She is chosen and civic. After you fail a skill test, as a reaction, after you fail a skill test, you may take an additional action during your turn this round, limit once per round. Her elder sign, +1, you may instead choose to automatically fail this skill test to heal 1 damage and 1 horror. I can hear it. Can it hear me? 8 health and 8 sanity. On the back, deck size of 30. Deck building options, Survivor 0 to 5, Neutral 0 to 5. Deck building requirements that don't count toward deck size. 3 copies of neither Rain nor Snow, 1 copy of Called by the Mist, 1 random basic weakness. Before Stella began working for the Postal Service in Arkham, she knew 2 things with certainty. First, her parents made a mistake when they called her their son and gave her a boy's name. Second, the house on the cliff in Kingsport whispered her true name, the name she chose for herself, late at night. Stella. Delivering the mail 6 days a week in all kinds of weather wasn't an easy job, but Stella loved knowing that she was helping people connect with one another. Then she started finding the letters. At the end of her route, there was always 1 extra envelope in her bag. It was always addressed to her. It was always postmarked from Kingsport. And it always contained a letter with 1 typed word. Stella. Okay then. So let's take a look at her signature asset. Unlike with Daisy, we get a skill this time and we get 3 copies of it. Neither Rain nor Snow. It's a skill, 3 question marks on commit. And if the skill test fails, cancel all effects of the failed test. So anything extra that we play would probably also get canceled. But anyway, we also have our basic weakness. Called by the Mists. It's a curse. Revelation, put Called by the Mists into play in your threat area. Forced, after you initiate a skill test with a difficulty 4 or higher, take 1 damage, 2 actions to discard it. Ideally, we'll dip further into Survivor combat options. And admittedly, Survivor is the one class I have the least experience with in this game. So you'll get to watch me bumble my way through a full campaign with a Survivor. Though a great way to learn about a class is to throw yourself in with a class you haven't played very often before. We'll see how much of a disaster this campaign is. Anyway, let's move back up top for the prologue and the first tarot reading for the campaign. With that handled, we're also going to run through the prologue in this video since it's fairly long and it'll impact Sunday's video.
Prologue. Dr. Henry Armitage pours himself a glass of Pinot and sits down at his desk, gesturing for you to sit across from him. I apologize for the short notice, he begins. His face is pale, his forehead sweaty and wrinkled with worry. Armitage, the head librarian of Miskatonic University and a former mentor of yours, privately contacted you in the hopes of gaining your assistance. Eager to help, you made your way to his home in Southside. Upon entering, you were surprised to find his home in disarray. Books and notes litter his desk, and an empty bottle of wine has tipped over onto the ground by the fireplace. You'd always known Armitage to be neat and well organized. The elderly man takes a moment to collect his thoughts. I am looking for two of my colleagues, Dr. Francis Morgan, Professor of Archaeology, and Warren Rice, Professor of Languages. Warren was supposed to meet up with me over supper earlier today to discuss several important findings, but he has since gone missing. At first I thought nothing of it, but I have a nagging feeling something else is going on. A very familiar feeling. You've never seen Armitage quite this worried before. His hands tremble as he reaches for the glass on his desk, and he sips from it nervously. I tried to find Francis, hoping he knew where Warren was, but he too is out of touch. Francis has been spending a lot of time in some gambling den, or so I am told. And I sent for you because I'm worried Warren might be in trouble. I would appreciate it greatly if you could find him for me. You may also wish to ask Francis for help if you can reach him. The investigators must decide. Choose one. Professor Warren Rice was last seen working late at night in the Humanities Department of Miskatonic University. Let's search for him there. Proceed with Scenario 1A, extracurricular activity, if you wish to find Professor Warren Rice first. Dr. Francis Morgan was last seen gambling at the Clover Club, an upscale speakeasy and gambling joint located downtown. Let's go talk to him. Proceed with Scenario 1B. The house always wins if you wish to find Dr. Francis Morgan instead. Or first.
Okay, so we do have... So this is what I meant by the spoiler alert about there being two possible first scenarios for the campaign. Well, we're ultimately going to end up playing both of them. That's probably not too big a spoiler. But we are going to use Daisy's connections with Miskatonic University and go try to find Professor Warren Rice first. So we're going to start with... So now that gives us our first scenario. So we'll be heading to Miskatonic University on Sunday to play through extracurricular activity. Before we leave the video, though, let's go through our tarot reading for this campaign. So we'll give this a quick shuffle. Our first tarot reading for the campaign. So just as a recollection on how I do the tarot readings, I do what's known as a balance reading. So I'll pick two tarot cards. I'll pick two cards from this tarot deck that I'm shuffling. I'll leave one on the good side and flip the other one to the bad side. So we get one good effect and one bad effect out of this. And these are going to be our two tarot cards for the scenario. So first up we find the Sun 19. During each investigator's first turn, they may take two additional actions. Or if we flip it to the bad side, during each investigator's first turn, they have two fewer actions to take. And then over here, we find Justice 11. Cancel the first doom that would be placed on the final agenda of the game, or the final agenda of the game enters play with one doom on it. I think we're going to flip that one to its bad side. So the effect that we'll have, the Sun 19 will give us two extra actions to take, but Justice 11 will make it so that the final agenda comes into play with an extra doom on it. So now that we've handled all of that, thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone.